Superb. Okay, lovely. Welcome to Qunba, Nadir. Absolute pleasure hosting you here.
So I feel that you don't have to control people for them to achieve, you have to let them free. In my youth, I was very skeptical about Mahatma Gandhi, partly because I thought running spinning wheels is not going to solve India's problems. But the more I read about him, two things struck me. The important thing is to have trust in people. It's difficult to achieve, but it can be done. I would encourage everyone to be interested in lots and lots of different things because that's how you develop your personality. Don't try and be unidimensional. I don't believe in specialists.
What turns a person into a leader of people? How do I become a true leader of people?
I often think that it's a cause that turns a person into a leader. And for businesses, it's often a purpose that turns the head of the business into a leader, because a cause or a purpose inspires the leader, and of course it inspires the team, which is always more important than the leader.
Mr. Godrej, you've had a ringside view of the evolution of Indian corporate leadership over the last many decades, 4 or 5 decades. What is the one positive and the one negative change you have noticed here in Indian leadership?
One very big positive is the emphasis on ESG, whether it's the focus on sustainability, whether it's inclusiveness on the social agenda of ESG, and the emphasis on governance. But unfortunately, one negative is that we still have had a lot of scandals where governance has been bad, companies have gone into trouble, money has been stolen from companies, and this has happened in large companies as well as in startups.
You've witnessed as well in Indian leadership through the emergency, the license Raj, liberalization, and today's startup boom. Who are some of the most striking Indian leaders you have encountered during this time, and what have you picked from them?
One of them was JRD Tata, whose values were always excellent. The others were people from the information technology industry, Azim Premji, Narayan Murthy, who brought a new style of leadership. Earlier, we were used to command leadership, almost a military style. And now we had all these tech workers, highly educated people who needed a different type of leadership. And we saw a more collegiate leadership develop, not a military leadership. So I think that was a very interesting development. And then in the startup world, we saw people with new ideas doing amazing things. And the importance that if your idea is right and you work on it properly, and grow the scale of the business, use network effects. We have had very successful startups, and that's a change from which established businesses can learn.
What's the best way you think as advice for CEOs to manage, and you've seen this very closely, in family-led or promoter-led companies? What should CEOs do?
Right.
And the flip to that question is, how should promoters or families lead when they appoint CEOs to make the professionalize their business?
Now, in promoter-led businesses, sometimes the CEO is a promoter and sometimes the CEO is a professional. And of course, promoters also need experience, so they need to be CEOs at some time. Currently, none of the promoters in our side of the Godrej group are CEOs. We are professional CEOs, but in the past, we have been CEOs. And I think it's a very good combination when there's, say, a promoter chairman and a professional CEO. They bring different things to the table. The chairman brings a long-term perspective, the established values of the group. The CEO does the actual implementation, at which they are often very good. And it's very important that the two work hand in hand to achieve the best results. If they work at cross purposes, it's going to be a disaster. If they collaborate, it can be a great success.
And today, with the number of D2C startups competing with large houses like GCPL, for example. What is your advice to young entrepreneurs? How can they face giant companies?
Right. The big advantage of the entrepreneur is that they're nimble. The big advantage of the giant companies is that they have set practices. The set practices means they know how to handle government, they know how to handle the environment, they know how to make sure that they don't slip into serious mistakes. But they tend to be bureaucratic, they are not nimble. And so both these things are advantages and disadvantages. So the young entrepreneur of startup must try and take all the advantage of his nimbleness, his ability to act quickly, but not fall into the trap of not being able to manage situations because proper systems are not in place, or he should be able to handle regulation, the government, not fall afoul of those, which easily startups can do.
Are there some common behavioral traits that you've observed with the new generation or younger leaders running startups today that you think they could avoid?
There are a few startups that have got into trouble with governance issues. And that's something that they definitely should avoid. And it's not something that all startups are facing, but surprisingly, quite a few have faced that.
Drill down a little into more career advice as a leader. What's a very common piece of advice that you've often heard people give, but in today's context that you completely disagree with?
Yes, Indian parents have often preferred certain professions. They often want their children to become engineers or doctors or lawyers, and the children may not be interested in those professions. I think it's very bad to decide your profession based on your parents' preferences rather than decide based on what you're good at or what your passion is. You can't always go by passion. You have to have a match between passion and competence. But you can acquire a passion for where your competence lies, or work very hard on doing very well where your passion lies. And even if it looks like your passion is not a great career, actually people who work in their passions make themselves into very successful, say, artists or liberal arts majors who can work anywhere because of their broad knowledge. So I think it's important to emphasize broad knowledge and passion, and not go by what people think are likely to be good careers. And in a fast-changing world, we can't really predict what is a good career, and we have to be ready for anything. We have to have broad knowledge so that we can adapt to the future rather than be stuck in the professions of the past.
Mr. Godrej, why do you feel people leave jobs? And what should mid-level leaders do to ensure that people don't leave because of bad managers?
Right. In the past, we had a lot of people who stayed in an organization for many years. Recently, we had some retirees who were in the organization for 40 years. I know this is becoming less and less common. Partly there are more opportunities out there, so sometimes people go for that. But it's really sad when people leave an organization because they have a bad manager. And all organizations must do something to prevent that. And what's very important is the culture of the organization. If the culture of the organization is good, people won't leave because of bad managers or bad culture. They may leave for something that they find more attractive. That's very hard to prevent, but you certainly should have a good culture that encourages people to stay and feel at home and feel fulfilled.
Many leaders often look for connection with people when they want to hire them, right? Like, get along with this person. We're like, how do you square that up with not creating mini versions of yourself and yes men in the room?
Yes, this is a problem. In the past, we also felt that we were recruiting many people like what we already had. We had a lot of engineers, a lot of MBAs, and often those kind of people were recruited. Now we try to draw people from broader, also inclusiveness on every dimension, whether it's women, LGBT, or different educational backgrounds. And one way of doing that is to have several people interview so that each one will look for people like themselves and not one person looking for someone like him or her.
We'll just pan a little broader. What do you think are the two most underrated qualities used by leaders today in their leadership?
I think empathy. It's a very important quality for a leader. Doesn't always come easily to men. Women are often very good at it. So empathy, there definitely should be more empathy in leaders. I think that's definitely lacking.
And I'll just double click on that. Given the importance of empathy and compassion in leadership, how do you square that up with sometimes driving hard for results with your team and sometimes even having to let people go?
Yeah. The important thing is to have trust in people. When you have trust in people, you don't have to drive them. They are self-motivated. It's difficult to achieve, but it can be done. And I had this experience from a very early age because my mother was a teacher and she ran a very unusual classroom. I would sometimes walk into her classroom and the children were talking loudly and moving all over the class. She would give assignments to the children at the beginning of the week. They could do the assignments at any time during the week, at home or in class. They could ask for help from each other or from my mother. And so it was a noisy, rambunctious class, but they achieved a lot. So I feel that you don't have to control people for them to achieve. You have to let them free to let them achieve. Of course, you have to have constant dialogue, check that everything is going well, but you don't have to interfere too much.
What's the most common myth or misconception about leadership that you'd like to clarify?
I think there used to be a concept, though it's not very common now, that leadership is something like a general, keeping all the troops in line and getting everyone to march. And that concept is, fortunately, nobody really believes in that anymore. There's more of a concept that people should be allowed to work to their full potential. They need to be helped, but not directed.
So, Godrej has had an illustrious 120-year history spanning 4 generations of leadership. What is one tenet of leadership that has been passed down the generations that still holds value at the core of Godrej today?
I think there are 2 or 3 things. First of all, trust. We've always kept trust as a very important criterion. Then innovation. Our founder was a lawyer who became an inventor. And so innovation was always very important to us. And customer-centricity was always very important to us. And those values have continued throughout and are very, very important. And respect for others. And now that has expanded to even inclusiveness. If you don't have respect, you will never want to be inclusive. So if you're respectful to everybody, inclusiveness will come naturally.
You've watched this transition of leadership. You mentioned you were CEOs early as well, Mr. Nadir Godrej, Jamshed, yourself, to the next generation of leaders, Nisa, Firoja. Taking over some of these group companies, what is the one significant shift in leadership style you have noticed between these generations?
In the younger generation, a few positive things I've noticed. One is Nisa spent a lot of time on human relations and getting in better talent, organizing the talent better. Nisa also started our Good and Green program, which emphasized ESG, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, long before compulsory corporate social responsibility spends. We always had an ethos of corporate social responsibility, but now it was better defined. And in fact, because of this initiative of Nisa, I got very involved in our environmental sustainability, which has stood the group in very good stead. And Pirojsha organized Godrej Properties in a way to make it a very large organization, very successful organization, by emphasizing on performance and getting very good performance by empowering the team.
How do you navigate differences in the opinions of different founders, leaders, CEOs who equally have vast degrees of experience, qualifications, and illustrious career? How do you get great minds to work together?
I have never faced a problem working with others. I try to listen, try to see their point of view, and I feel that people with a good heart and a good mind, by listening carefully, can come to conclusions that everyone agrees. I like to develop consensus, and therefore I've not really faced a lot of issues. Sometimes other people in the family might be a little bit more difficult, but we usually try to work things out.
How do you run an effective meeting? How does Nadir Godrej run a very effective meeting?
Try to stick to the agenda, give everyone a chance to contribute, because when everyone contributes, you get better decision making because you get lots of new ideas, plus there's much better buy-in. And if anyone objects to anything, I like to ask the objector to propose a solution. Very often the objection is quite sound, and the solution means that we are back on track with even better result, because whatever possible objection there was has been solved.
3 simple words that describe you or your leadership style.
Inclusive, listening, and taking everyone on board.
2 things that you value or relate most about the Godrej leadership culture, and 2 things you would like to infuse more of in that culture.
Our culture, we try to be where there's a high level of trust, high level of camaraderie, and what we would want to infuse more is new age thinking. The world is changing very fast. We are moving into a world where there'll be artificial intelligence, which is both very empowering and very dangerous. People have compared it to nuclear power, where you can blow up the world, or you can get excellent energy without carbon emissions. But you have to drive this balance, and it's very difficult for old organizations to adapt to this new world. And I would like to infuse this kind of thinking in the Godrej Group. By the way, my youngest son worked for TCS and studied artificial intelligence. And we hope that when he joins the company, we will move in this direction.
How do you personally deal with criticism as a leader? What should one do?
I was thinking about this question, and I don't know whether I haven't welcomed criticism or what the reason is. I haven't seen a lot of criticism. But I feel that people should carefully listen to criticism wherever it comes from, because it's always a learning opportunity. One should not be defensive. One should try and ask the person criticizing you to propose a solution. And criticism is an opportunity to learn and should be welcomed. But perhaps I haven't had enough learning opportunities.
And the most brutal feedback that you ever received on your leadership?
I have never received brutal feedback.
Lucky you.
But I have received good advice from time to time.
What's the most significant advice, mentoring advice that you received? Can you share that with us?
Didn't receive direct mentoring advice, but I, of course, watched my brother a lot. And one thing, he was always much more decisive than I was, and I tried to be more decisive after looking at him. He was also very orderly. His desk would be cleared at the end of the day. My desk is still very cluttered. And I remember even when I was a student, my father would say, how can you be a good student if your desk is so cluttered? And I was doing the IIT entrance exam, and at that time my desk was very cluttered. And again, he said, you won't do well in the IIT entrance exam if your desk is so cluttered. So then I stood second in the IIT entrance exam. So I went to my father, and he said, had your desk not been cluttered, you would have stood first.
What creates self-doubt for someone like you, and how do you overcome it as a leader?
I'm usually an optimist, but I sometimes worry about unforeseen things and I usually go to bed very easily, but sometimes I wake up early in the morning and start thinking, and I worry, what if this happens? What if that happens? But I found that our organization is extremely resilient. On the one hand, you can do scenario planning and try and forecast what might go wrong. On the other hand, you could have a responsive organization that's resilient. And we showed that in COVID. We didn't know that COVID was coming. We didn't know what to expect. But very soon we organized ourselves. Our factories were working 15 days after lockdown. CEOs had town hall meetings and had innovative solutions, having factory workers live in the factories. The factory office workers were working from home, and the blue collar workers were living in the factory offices. So they came up with solutions like that. So I feel that it's no point worrying, but when something strikes you, you must immediately gather everybody around and find a solution.
In your formative years, all right, who do you think had a very significant influence on your early thought process about leading people? And what is that one or two lessons that has stayed with you throughout as a core tenet that you've passed on to your children?
I already mentioned my mother and how you give freedom to people, and she was never for sticks, but she was always for carrots, praising people, encouraging people to do the right thing and not saying, do this or. Yeah, so that was a very profound experience for me. From my father, I learned how to do broad thinking. He was a scientist, he was an engineer. I learned a lot of science from him, but I also learned geography, politics, free market economics in the time of socialism. He was very involved with the Forum of Free Enterprise and the Swatantra Party, and long before the liberalization came and rescued us. And so I got this broad thinking. He was very interested in languages. He spoke German. He knew how to pronounce French and Italian. He spoke French also. And he taught me languages. He was expert on etymology, the origins of words, and that helped me a lot. That helped me with my poetry as well. And so I learned this kind of broad thinking from my father. Then there were a few professors when I was at MIT who were very helpful. One of them was Professor Powers, who, while I was studying chemical engineering, encouraged me to read Double Helix and to study biology. So I took courses in biophysical chemistry and so on, which were very helpful for me when I was running Godrej Agrovet, where a lot of biology was required. It also helped me in my personal life because I was working in an animal feed business where I learned a lot of nutrition, and I'm also very careful about what I eat now. Animal nutrition is not that different from human nutrition. And then there was Professor Bador, the head of our department, who strangely enough, way back in 1973, told me to do a paper on carbon dioxide emissions in the air and the rising level of carbon dioxide. That was 20 to 30 years before people were concerned about what it could do, but he could foresee that, and I'm very glad that I got that early warning. And then at Harvard Business School, in a way, it's a strange thing to say, but you're in your section every day in that amphitheater-like classroom. It's almost like a kindergarten. You get to know all the 70 people over there. And it was a tremendous learning experience. And every day you study 3 new cases. Apart from all the important business lessons you learn a lot of general knowledge. And I've always been very interested in general knowledge, so I would pick up all those lessons as well, not just the business lessons. So you get a broad perspective, you learn from different people with different views, everyone says their point of view, and then you come to a conclusion. So that was a great learning experience as well.
Good, you mentioned the Harvard phase, and somebody who's come from the West back into India to lead a very large conglomerate like Godrej. Do you think Indian leaders or the world is learning something from Indian leadership? Are we exporting something to the world on leadership today?
I think leadership lessons seem to be common all over the world. I think a little bit because of our IT industry was so big, and that this new style of leadership that came up from the IT industry is very good. And I think Indian leaders are taking social responsibility more seriously. And the government's compulsory spend on social responsibility is 2% of our profits. And because of what we learned from Michael Porter about shared value, we try to do our social responsibility in a way that society benefits. Sometimes it's our customers who benefit, therefore the business benefits, the environment benefits. And one of the examples I have is of watershed projects, which have multiple benefits. Farmers, because more water is there, farmers can increase their yields. Trees are grown there that sequester carbon. We can sell to those farmers our agricultural products. So it benefits everyone. Sometimes I wonder if we should be spending even more than 2% on corporate social responsibility. So I think that's something that Indians take far more seriously. Many American businesses are now coming around to thinking that it's a joke and they shouldn't take it very seriously. I think that's something Indian leadership can teach the world. And business and society benefit from it. My wife doesn't believe you can do good if you don't sacrifice. And I tell her that I'm an engineer. I don't believe in sacrifice. I believe in optimization. I want to help somebody by helping myself.
Who are 2 to 3 leaders that you've groomed under your tutelage that you're very proud of today?
I should mention Nitin Nabar, who just retired. He was the head of our chemicals business, and his predecessor, Matthew Ipe. And of course, Balram Yadav, who's the head of Godrej Agrovet, has been there for many, many years. And I can't say that I contributed to their development very much. They were very good leaders in their own right. But I must say that we had a very good working equation. We had different skills and we could work off each other. For instance, Balram is not a scientist, so he asked me to look after Agrovet's R&D and so on, which of course I was very happy to oblige with. And in the chemical business also, I played a lot of role on the science. I'm an engineer and an MBA, and I understand finance and economics. So I can often get the broad picture very well. So I help out with that, but they are all great leaders and have done a great job.
What is the one common trait among all of them that you observed?
They are very good with people. They all have these town hall meetings where they get everyone on board, and there is a lot of teamwork in both these organizations, which is a common trait and which I think is essential for success, because leaders sometimes think that the credit goes to them, but of course the credit goes to the team. And the leader's job is really to get the team ticking. He doesn't have to do anything else.
And these 3 leaders who groomed under your tutelage, is there a common piece of advice that you always kept giving them?
I didn't actually have to give the advice. They all knew it, that honesty is the best policy, trust of customers, customer-centricity. In fact, both Matthew and Nitin rose from the marketing function. Although they're both technically qualified, I think they didn't keep up a lot with their technical skills, developed marketing skills. But in these technical businesses, it's important that you know the technical aspects of your product to be able to sell to your customers. So from the marketing and their technical knowledge, help them to integrate the whole business and make sure, although we tried very, very hard, we used to have niggling quality complaints. Whatever was easy to control, we solved very well. But sometimes there was some things that just kept cropping, completely new situations. Often it was in things like packaging and places like that. The product itself was good, but it was packed in a way that it got bad and things like that. So we had to try very hard to overcome those problems, but we are getting there.
Who in business India is inspiring Mr. Godrej right now? And what do you think are some of the pitfalls in their leadership they've managed to avoid while building highly successful businesses?
Well, one person I've always admired a lot is Rahul Bajaj, and we just released a book about him. And the fact that he was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and the fact that he was very outspoken are two very important characteristics of him. N. Chandrasekhar, who came at a very difficult time and managed to take the Tata Group to new heights. And of course, some of the startup companies in India who have done very well, good lessons for all of us to learn from.
What's the end goal and the chase for Mr. Godrej that inspires you to be at work every single morning?
It's just fun. It's just fun being here. I don't have to work very hard now. My doors are always open if somebody needs help. But the CEOs are carrying the business. And the area where I still take a lot of interest is R&D. My friend Michael Phelps says that Indian companies are not spending enough of R&D. We have upped our R&D budgets. We opened a new R&D center for Godrej Agrovet at Rabale recently. At Ambernath, we've set up a new chemicals R&D center. GCPL, of course, has a very big R&D. I'm not personally very involved in that, but I'm also involved in the Chemical Council, where all our chemical businesses, including some of the customers like GCPL, is not a chemical business, a big customer of chemicals. We try to meet all of us together to get our act together. And so all our chemical businesses are now doing very well, and that is also very exciting for me. Right now, I'm more excited with science than management.
You are a very renowned poet in the industry and adept at mixing business and poetry. What dimension has this added, you think, to your leadership, and how do you think engaging in creative pursuits has benefited you in your role?
The poems are usually very well received, and so they're memorable. Also, another benefit is they're not very long, because the message is captured. There's not a lot of superfluous material there. Sometimes a little bit. Sometimes, so they're all rhyming poems. Sometimes the rhymes lead you on a new track. Sometimes a rhyme leads to a joke, which always helps. So that's how it helps. Recently, we had a leadership forum meeting where I had a poem in the morning to the leadership, and then we had an awards function where I wrote a poem for that also. And the awards function team asked me to do something which I'd never done before. They asked me to convert it into a rap song, and they provided some music to it. So people enjoyed it. It made the awards function a lot of fun. That inspires people. They work harder, makes my job easier. So it's very helpful. I had written a few poems, more like private poems. Sometimes when I was struggling with something, I would write a poem. When I wanted to tell someone something that I couldn't say it in words, I would write them a poem and send it. Then one day, in those days, it was the Harvard Business School Economic Times Award. And there was a function in Calcutta, and all I had to do was give a vote of thanks. And I gave my vote of thanks as a short poem. And I started off it by saying, "A vote of thanks, that thankless task." I don't know why they always ask. Some silly fool. So it was Calcutta, and it was very well received. So I said, maybe I should make all my speeches as poems.
Lovely, very, very honest, and thank you for that. Final question for today before we come to rapid fire. What will Mr. Nadir Godrej's legacy be? What would you want your legacy to be?
Yes, there would be different aspects of my legacy. I would hope that my family would be very successful. I hope my businesses would be very successful. And I hope I would be remembered for my poetry. And also, as a Renaissance man, because I don't want to be known just as an engineer or as a scientist. There's also the poetry, there's also the group support for the arts. When I was at MIT, apart from learning economics, chemical engineering, I also studied 4 levels of French, because in the first summer I went to the south of France with my cousin, and although I'd studied French in school, I realized I couldn't speak all that much. So I studied 4 semesters worth of French at MIT as well. I also did drama at MIT. And I haven't acted on the stage for a long time, but I used that experience for reciting my poems.
With that, we're going to come to our rapid fire. These are just quick 1-word, 1-sentence answers. We can come back to them if you don't have an answer, or just say pass. Okay, lovely, enjoy it. Quick 30 questions, here we go. The hardest thing about being a CEO is dash.
Admitting to failure.
One thing you've learned never to do as a leader.
To be a dictator.
One thing you've learned always to do as a leader.
Listen to everybody.
A leader who's captivated your imagination.
Mahatma Gandhi. Can I elaborate a bit on that? In my youth, I was very skeptical about Mahatma Gandhi. Partly because I thought running spinning wheels is not going to solve India's problems. But the more I read about him, 2 things struck me. One, his profound investigation. He was a spiritual man who was scientific about spirituality. My experiments with truth. That impressed me. Then another essay of his where he said, he started off by saying God is truth. Then he talked to some of his atheist friends, and he finally turned it around to truth is God. So all these things impressed me. And then people like Rahul Bajaj, who through his grandfather and father were inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, what successful businessmen they became, his whole idea of trusteeship. And for all these reasons, I think he was a great leader, and the way he led our independence movement. The only sad thing was partition. I wish he could have stopped that.
Beautifully said. It's a very deep thought. When in doubt, Mr. Godrej dash, Nadir dash. When in doubt, Nadir dash.
I investigate. You'll always find the answer by asking around or doing an experiment.
2 books that you would recommend young leaders to read in leadership roles.
On this book about Rahul Bajaj is a good book. You don't have to read the whole book, because there are 79 authors, and they're all pretty much on a similar message. But little bits of that would be a very good experience. And all the leadership books which tell you that leadership is about inclusion.
70-hour work week.
No way. 40 hours is quite good, and there are many critiques of the French experiment for a 36-hour work week, but I wouldn't object to that. I wouldn't even mind a 3-day, 12-hour work week. Because people work outside their working hours also. And it's very important to have work-life balance. And if you have good work-life balance, you're probably doing some kind of work while you're living your life as well. So we must bear all those things in mind. And when you have very long work weeks, people pretend to work, which doesn't help anybody.
Is there a business leader who you wish you had as your teacher in school?
I would say JRD Tata. He was dead before I was born, but he was quite amazing. He was quite amazing.
Something you wish people knew more about you that they don't?
That I'm interested in lots and lots of different things, And I would encourage everyone to be interested in lots and lots of different things, because that's how you develop your personality. Don't try and be unidimensional. I don't believe in specialists. One person once said that people should be like a tea. They should have a broad base and one specialty. Then somebody added that you should be like a pie, a broad base and two specialties, one a little bit bigger than the other.
A secret vice no one knows about you.
I like to sometimes goof off and do puzzles, even while at work.
Besides his business and family, Nadir's most prized possession in life is?
My most prized possession in life is my family. My wife and my 3 sons and the extended family.
Data or instinct? What do you rely on more as a leader?
I personally am very much a data fact person. But and even yesterday I was in a meeting in which somebody is an intuition coach. And my wife believes a lot in intuition. And sometimes I've gone wrong with facts when her intuition has proved right. And I would like to rely more on intuition. But I myself tend to rely more on data. And I've also heard that it's never ignore your intuition, but always test it with data and facts.
A moment or period from your life you would love to relive again? Saint-Tropez.
Saint-Tropez, definitely. I went there twice, so I did relive it once. And my college days, and the troubled times, which I'm going to read about in the poem. I wouldn't mind reliving that again, though it was a very troubled time.
If you were down to your last crore, where would you bet it on?
An exciting startup. Something with a purpose and solving a problem.
If you could speak only one of the 6 languages that you are fluent in, what would it be?
French. Well, I should mention that one of them I've forgotten. It is Russian.
Between chemistry, math, and poetry, which do you find more creative?
I think all human pursuits are creative. You can't say one is more creative than the other. You might even argue that my poetry is narrative poetry. It's not particularly creative.
If you could go back to research at MIT, your choice of topic would be dash today.
Climate change. Or rather, solutions to climate change. And that is something that in the group we are working on, investing in funds that are investing in that, trying to use these solutions in our own businesses. It's very, very sad that the cost of adaptation, you saw what the heat wave did just now in India, is already higher than the cost of prevention. We are stupid in not preventing climate change. Business could easily solve this problem if we had a level playing field. We can't be expected to reduce our profits if our competitors are not doing it. But if you have any kind of level playing field, cap and trade industry-wide, or a uniform carbon tax all over the world, and that won't cost governments much because they could replace some other tax with a carbon tax, so the burden on the economy wouldn't be any higher. If we had a level playing field, we could solve this problem, and we should solve this problem, and the sooner we do it, the better.
One thing you wish people knew more about the Godrejs?
I think people know a lot about the Godrejs. And
is there a fun fact that you'd like to share about the Godrej family? Any small fun fact?
Yes. I don't know, some people may know about this, but sort of founding story. Our founder, Nadir Godrej, was born in the same year as Mahatma Gandhi. And one day he told Mahatma Gandhi that he was very foolish to think that India could be independent because the country didn't have an economy. But Mahatma Gandhi was not so foolish. He told him, "What are you doing about it?" That started the Godrej Group. So innovation was at the core, Mahatma Gandhi was at the core. And that's why I admire Mahatma Gandhi, though he seemed like he was not very interested in economics. Actually, he was.
Do you have a favorite binge watch till date?
Oh, no, I don't binge watch. But I do watch a lot of television, usually factual television, like Medici was very interesting. Crown was very interesting. The Medici I like very much because modern civilization started in Italy. The French claim they are very, very civilized, but the Italians always say that it was an Italian woman who civilized the French, and that was the French call her Catherine de Médicis. She was a queen. She brought Italian culture to France, and not only was a queen, she was the mother of 3 kings and the mother-in-law of Henry IV, who was a very important French king also. So I like that development of European civilization. I've always been very interested in Europe. I'm sure the powers of be in India might not like that very much. But of course, I've always been very interested in Indian civilization as well. And I think all civilizations are interconnected. And I love our G20 slogan, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, a very good export quality, and it should be promoted in India as well.
If you had the power to invent a holiday today in India, what would we all be celebrating?
Science Day.
Poetry sessions with Vikram Seth at St. Tropez or swimming tips from Michael Phelps?
I'm not a good enough swimmer to benefit from Michael Phelps. And the other 2 are equally attractive.
If you have a gigantic billboard and you could put out a message to millions of young leaders and youth, what would that be and why?
I think I would say take climate change seriously, because that's an existential crisis and it is in the power of young leaders to solve it.
Super. With that, thank you very, very much,
Sure.
Mr. Godrej.
And now I'll relate my story, a tale of trouble and some glory. I had no idea what was in store. 1 year, our loss was 80 crore. We wondered why we had invested in something strange and so untested as making olefins from oil. It hardly seemed worth all that toil. But alcohol was an intermediate, not ethyl, which gives an immediate kick to all those who imbibe it. And I would describe it as from C12 to C18. And now this change in tack would mean a change in all our strategy. To lead this change was up to me. I did not do it all alone. My team was good, as is well known. The group was there with all its strengths. To help us out, they went great lengths. A merger helped to save our skin. You must survive before you win. We lived to fight another day. Step by step, we found the way. We had to work to make things right. On every front, we had to fight. Now we had suffered for our sins. But since we stopped the olefins, we had 2 columns that were idle. Not using them was suicidal. Configuring them for fractionation, we used them for the preparation of much desired single cuts. And when we settle into ruts, such innovation gets us out. And I have not the slightest doubt our engineers helped save the day, the continuous improvement way. With the help of all of them, we started off with TQM. We learned a lot of useful stuff, but all of that was not enough. We learned to stretch capacity with bellicose rapacity. We focused on the bottlenecks with grips that could well throttle necks. and month by month the throughput rose. From everyone we always sought good learnings, but the one who taught us best was Tokyo's Mr. Kawai, who's always pushing us to try to make our product somewhat better. And then one day we got a letter complaining we were not consistent, although we were quite insistent that we had exceeded norms. He urged us to make reforms. We had exceeded by too much, and we learned that there is such a thing as being far too good. Without him, we never would have known that consistency is better than proficiency. A constant 98.2 is fine and better than a stray 99. So nothing will help better than a good customer from Japan to keep you always on your toes and teach you everything he knows. And if you have enough endurance, you will have the assurance your quality is of the best for having passed the greatest test. With our experience in soaps, we had already learned the ropes of processing most distillates available at attractive rates. Competitors use processed oil. Our R&D, with skill and toil, although the task was rather tough, found ways to use the cheaper stuff. All of this was very fine and added to the bottom line. The catalyst was optimized, the throughput was maximized, and per ton costs were minimized. The profits were then supersized. Production wasn't the only story. Now marketing brought us some glory. Flake longer chains were our forte. We found new markets for a sortie. In China, we could sell a lot. We liked the margins that we got. In Argentina and Brazil, our coffers we could slowly fill. We partnered well with Galaxy. We gave them JIT delivery. We listened first, and then we played. Each time we made a different grade. Our annual customer survey enables us to well purvey to customers' recorded needs.